Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are breaking down a truly staggering moment in history. We're going to unravel the precise chain of events that led to America's deadliest industrial accident. We'll be looking at the timeline, the science, and the incredibly high stakes of everyday industrial materials. So, let's get right into the Texas City disaster.
Okay, let's dive into this. 2,000 tons. That is the sheer volume of material just sitting in the harbor that day. But we aren't talking about dynamite here. We're not talking about weapons-grade explosives. We are talking about fertilizer. It's a massive amount of a seemingly harmless substance that, as we're about to see, had the power to change an entire city forever.
Section 1. A normal morning.
To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of what went wrong, we first have to understand the baseline of normalcy that existed right before the disaster. So, it's April 16, 1947, in Texas City, Texas. The port is already absolutely buzzing with activity even before the sun comes up. It's just your standard, busy industrial morning. Cargo ships are lined up tightly along the docks, freight is being actively loaded by crews of workers, and the nearby factories, they're humming along, operating exactly as usual. There is absolutely zero sense of impending doom.
Moored right in the middle of this harbor is a French vessel called the SS Grand Camp. And inside its hull is that cargo we mentioned earlier, ammonium nitrate. Now, it's really vital to note what the consensus was at the time. Ammonium nitrate is a chemical commonly used as fertilizer, and back in 1947, it was generally believed to pose no serious danger. The people working on and around the ship, well, they thought they were just handling everyday agricultural supplies. The stark contrast between this everyday utility and its explosive potential is really the core of this whole tragedy.
Section 2. Smoke in the hold.
This is where the narrative shifts, and the first warning signs of a massive catastrophe begin to appear. Let's map out this morning on a timeline, because the window from normalcy to complete devastation is frighteningly short. We move from the pre-sunrise buzzing of the port to around 8 a.m. This is the critical moment when crew members on the SS Grand Camp first notice smoke rising from one of the ship's cargo holds. And this impending doom hits its climax just over an hour later, at 9:12 a.m.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing the mechanical failure of the crew's decision-making. These steps show a well-intentioned yet ultimately disastrous protocol. Instead of unloading the cargo immediately upon noticing the smoke, they tried to smother the fire. They sealed the hatch to cut off the oxygen and then pumped steam directly into the compartment. On paper, to them, it probably seemed like a highly reasonable solution, right? But inside that enclosed hold, pumping in hot steam only caused the temperature of the highly reactive ammonium nitrate to rise even further. They were essentially creating a giant pressure cooker.
And that brings us to one of the most chilling details from the source material. Just listen to this quote. "Crowds gathered along the docks to watch the smoke. Some people even took photographs." The dramatic irony here is just immense. You have oblivious onlookers, curious dock workers and residents standing merely a short distance away. They are completely unaware that they're posing for photos right next to what is about to become one of the largest industrial explosions in American history.
Section 3. The devastating explosion.
The pressure cooker finally reaches its breaking point. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the SS Grand Camp detonates. It doesn't just catch fire, it absolutely obliterates. A massive, sudden fireball shoots thousands of feet straight up into the sky. In a fraction of a second, the ship and its massive load of chemical fertilizer are instantly converted into raw, uncontrolled kinetic energy.
To really understand the sheer scale of this shockwave, you have to look at the surrounding geography. The blast was so unbelievably powerful that it shattered windows nearly 40 miles away. Let that sink in for a second. 40 miles away and glass is blowing out of frames. Closer to the epicenter, the shockwave physically flattened massive warehouses, industrial factories, and residential homes all throughout Texas City.
This massive shockwave instantly translated into unimaginable physical destruction. The force of the explosion was so extreme that it ripped nearby ships completely apart. It tossed heavy railroad cars violently right off their tracks. And as you can see highlighted here, giant pieces of steel from the Grand Camp were thrown through the air like missiles. Entire buildings were collapsing within seconds under this immense bombardment of debris and pressure.
But the nightmare? It was far from over. The disaster quickly took on a cascading effect. All of that burning, missile-like debris landed across a heavily industrialized port, immediately igniting nearby oil storage tanks and chemical facilities. Fires began to spread rapidly, completely out of control. And then, the unthinkable happens.
Several hours later, the intense heat triggers another ship in the harbor, also carrying ammonium nitrate, to explode. A second devastating blast rocks the already ruined city.
Section 4. Chaos and Rescue. In the immediate aftermath of these twin blasts, Texas City was officially a disaster zone, and the response had to be immediate. The heroic efforts of the responders literally cannot be overstated. Firefighters, police officers, military personnel, and everyday volunteers rushed straight into the burning, chaotic ruins. They were actively searching for survivors while navigating intense heat and the constant, terrifying threat of secondary explosions. Meanwhile, the local medical infrastructure was stretched way beyond its limits. Hospitals were completely overwhelmed with thousands of injured victims. Doctors were working around the clock in harrowing conditions, and they were supported only because massive amounts of blood donations began pouring in from across the entire country. So the crucial point is, when the fires were finally extinguished days later, the human toll was just devastating. Nearly 600 people had lost their lives, alongside the thousands injured, in a city that was largely reduced to rubble. It cemented this event as the deadliest industrial accident in American history.
Section 5. Lessons learned.
We're going to shift now from the tragedy itself to its legacy. When the smoke cleared and the investigations concluded, they found the central culprit, the improper handling of ammonium nitrate. The casual treatment of this highly reactive chemical, from how it was loaded to how that initial fire was fought, played the central defining role in the catastrophe.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive paradigm shift. Before 1947, everyday industrial materials were often handled without rigorous, specialized safety plans. But after the Texas City disaster, we saw major systemic transformations. The United States completely overhauled how hazardous materials are stored, how they are transported, and how they are handled. Furthermore, it completely transformed emergency planning for ports, chemical plants, and industrial facilities nationwide. The safety standards that protect workers around the world today were essentially born from the ashes of this very tragedy.
More than 70 years later, the Texas City disaster stands as a powerful reminder of what happens when safety procedures fail. It leaves us with a critical thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Knowing how quickly seemingly harmless everyday industrial materials can become incredibly dangerous, are we doing enough today to ensure they never become deadly again? Thank you so much for exploring this vital piece of history with me, and keep questioning the world around you.